Right, so Suella Braverman, has she broken the ministerial code again? Well, she resigned last time she did so, didn't she? So what makes this time any different? Last time it was the Leaky Sue scandal, wasn't it? Sending those confidential emails by an unsecured email address. So why hasn't she gone this time? Rishi Sunak was put on the spot about this by Chris Mason from BBC News whilst he's still at the G7 summit in Japan. He asked Sunak, will you ask the independent advisor on ministers' interests to look into your Home Secretary's conduct after she asked civil servants to help her deal with being caught speeding? And do you have full confidence in Suella Braverman? Note the language used by Mason there. There was no allegedly asked civil servants, no reportedly asked civil servants in the framing, in the BBC line of questioning. Pretty sure of themselves here, it seems. They'd be leaving themselves open to libel if they weren't fully confident they could back these accusations up, not allegations as such, are they? Of, say, she asked. Sunak's response, after a shaky sip of water, do you have any questions about the summit? That's not a good go-to response, is it? Mason came back with, others will, I think, and left things hanging just there, forcing Sunak to come out of the silence and finally respond with, I don't know the full details. I've been here in Japan. Hiding behind the summit to dodge any knowledge of it, he might as well have said. The minute I got wind of this, I had a small breakdown, started rocking in the corner, sucking my thumb. Why can I not leave these ministers alone for 5 minutes? Ever since I got this job, I felt like a blasted babysitter. Suella's got all the soothing, sentimental qualities of nappy rash. God, why is it her again? Instead, after denying all knowledge, he decided to say that he understood. She expressed regret, accepted the penalty, and paid the fine. Therefore, you either have some knowledge then, or you're just making shit up on the fly. I don't know which to believe. No, it doesn't really matter if the fine is now paid, though, does it? Not if she tried to dodge it to start with. Okay, so let's get into the story of what happened here exactly, and if Braverman has broken the ministerial code. Why has she not resigned yet? She did last time, as I said, after all. Well, the incident of speeding in question actually happened last summer when she was the Attorney General under Boris Johnson. She got caught speeding, and when that happens for the first time, as it was in Braverman's case, you get issued with the choice of taking 3 points on your licence or attending a speed awareness course in lieu of points. Now, Braverman wanted to take the speed awareness course. She didn't want the points. She was worried about higher insurance premiums as a result of that, despite the fact she was on a ministerial wage, some £150,000 a year-ish, and had a ministerial car, so didn't need to drive herself anywhere anyway. You work in London. You live just north of London in Hertfordshire. It's not like you live where your constituents are in Hampshire, is it? Oh, what am I thinking? I forgot she stays rent-free at Mummy and Daddy's when she goes there, doesn't she? You can argue she'd need her car for that. But Didham's dumpling, welcome to the world the rest of us exist in. Anyway, she opted for the course. But she didn't want to attend any old course. She didn't want to share her course with the public. She wanted a private one. She didn't want to attend a course with other people, often conducted online, small groups. But if she cropped up in one, you know it'd be public knowledge before the day was out that she'd been done for speeding. It'd be embarrassing, yes, but holding your hands up to an error in judgment like this, not really likely to do you a lot of damage long term, is it? Take a bit of bad press for a day. In Braverman's mind, though, that amounted to obeying the same laws as the rest of us mere mortals. She, the Attorney General in charge of law enforcement, tried to get special treatment at the hands of the law, didn't she? She didn't want to do a joint speed awareness course. She didn't want the fine in case it hurt her insurance. She tried to get that solo speed awareness session, was refused, and as such, tried to get her Department of Civil Servants, the law enforcement ones, let's not forget, to help her dodge the fine by organising this solo speed awareness session. They said no. Who did she think she was talking to here? Simon Case? They consulted the Cabinet Office to see if they were right in their refusal just to cover themselves, however. We know how so many of these civil servants get treated by ministers by now, after all, and they agreed they were right to refuse Braverman's request. Did she finally accept things at this point? Did she, heck? She then went to a political aide of hers to try and get this solo course sorted out for her. Again, this was refused. Eventually, she admitted defeat, had to accept she wasn't above the law, despite trying several times to place herself above it, all whilst being in charge, I'll say it again for those at the back who haven't been listening, being in charge of law enforcement as the Attorney General is, she ended up taking the fine and the points in the end. I'm sure she can afford her slightly higher insurance premiums if only she'd accepted this at the start. None of this would have happened. She's probably quite fortunate, really, as I recall the case of Liberal Democrat MP Chris Huhne and his wife, Vicky Price. Huhne, of course, convinced Price to claim she was driving when he was caught speeding and risked losing his licence. And when the deception came out, they ended up both getting jailed for 8 months for perverting the course of justice, and Huhne's political career was over. Of course, that case took 10 years from start to finish. Braverman, at least, I suppose, admitted defeat before things had got that far. But should that matter? She tried to get things overturned. That should require an inquiry. Sunak launching one would be potentially harmful to him, though, for 2 reasons. One, of course, is that her presence in cabinet puts the hard-right ERG faction of his party on side. If he gets rid of Braverman, as he absolutely should, in my opinion, it'll cause problems for him within his own party. The second reason to keep her where she is that outside the government she can pursue what she has made abundantly clear by now, and that is her own party leadership ambitions, as she set out earlier this week at the National Conservatism Conference in her keynote speech there for her fellow NatCs. Some might argue none of this, no investigation is necessary. It's old news now, except it isn't. It might have happened last year, but so what? She hasn't been made accountable for attempting to manipulate the law when she, a lawyer herself, she, the Attorney General, were in a position of considerable say regarding the law. It's like Nadim Zahawi fixing his taxes whilst he was in charge of HMRC. Yes, it took place before Sunak became PM, but you can argue if this came out at the time, she should have resigned for breaking the ministerial code. Would she have been made to by Johnson? Of course not. If Priti Patel could get away with bullying civil servants, trying to dodge a speeding fine was nothing. You can argue, though, that if this had come out before, she might not have ever been made Home Secretary by either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak. I doubt it would have put Truss off, mad as a box of frogs as she is. But Sunak? Probably not either, for the same reason I've often mentioned. He's incredibly weak, and he needs to keep certain factions quiet to continue in post. He needs them on side, even more so now after those local elections. Allowing an inquiry into this now will enrage backbenchers that he needs to keep on his side, but not doing so will enrage the public and give opposition parties more ammo to throw at a weak leader about how weak he really is. Sunak's damned either way, but he'll probably prefer some public ire right now than ongoing issues in his party later. I personally don't think an inquiry will be held unless significant further pressure comes, possibly from within his own party as well, from other factions, the more so-called moderates, and that certainly appears to be borne out by the fact Braverman hasn't yet resigned over a breach of the ministerial code, when she did so readily towards the end of Liz Truss's reign, did she not? But perhaps that's the point. Perhaps that's the real reason she went. Braverman jumped before Truss's ship crashed on the rocks, so she couldn't be tied to it, left her in a position where she could take a ministerial position somewhere else quite quickly, put her in a place where Sunak could just reinstate her, though it still looked pretty rancid all in all. Now she won't go at all. Why? Perhaps this time she thinks she hasn't done anything wrong to warrant it. I'd suggest the case of Chris Huhne and manipulating the law ought to be a lesson in that not necessarily being the case. Could a criminal case be opened up here? A legal challenge to what she did? Well, I presume we need an inquiry first to establish such facts. So again, the ball is back in Sunak's court. Ignorance seems to be the watchword on the media rounds this morning. When all this come up, so naturally the deployment of Sewage Queen, the talking turnip, Therese Coffey meant that ignorance could be assured, sticking to the line that she knew nothing, wouldn't speculate or comment on the ramifications of the allegations made against Braverman, and smiling ever so pleased with herself as she left Sophie Ridge, completely lost for words, as another government minister basically gave her the verbal equivalent of a shoulder shrug and saying, well, buggered if I know. Another scandal for the government, another one that was so avoidable if these Tories just accepted the law applies to them as it does to the rest of us. There would be no story if Braverman hadn't tried this on. She now must be held to account, and pressure needs to be kept on Sunak until he acts accordingly. As I alluded to before, though, he's unleashing his likely next leadership rival to begin campaigning if he cuts her loose. Perhaps if she's found criminally guilty of perverting the course of justice, her political career would be at an end, just as Chris Huhne's was. Maybe Sunak would go hard and fast on her, but he's not sounding that way at the moment, is he? And to be honest, it would be totally out of keeping for him. Instead of running from the ERG, he could take the fight to them, but it's never happened before. Either way, after you've liked and shared this video and subscribed to this channel, positively salivating at the prospect of the next video, as I'm sure you all are, unable to bear the thought of missing out on it, you can get a more in-depth look at Suella Braverman's leadership ambitions by having a gander at this video just here. Give the channel a bit longer, lots more to see, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers, folks.